The morning sun painted golden streaks across the ancient stones of Windsor Castle, as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her mirror. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate diamond earrings that had belonged to Princess Diana. Today was not just any day. It was the most important day in the monarchy's recent history, and the eyes of the world would be watching every move the royal family made. In the adjoining room, Prince William paced back and forth, his military dress uniform perfectly pressed, but his mind racing with the weight of responsibility. The coronation of his father, King Charles III, would mark a new chapter for the British monarchy, and William knew that his family's appearance and behavior would be scrutinized by millions of viewers across the globe. Catherine took a deep breath and walked to the children's rooms where chaos was barely contained by the royal nannies. Prince George, now 10 years old, was struggling with his ceremonial outfit, complaining that the collar felt too tight. Princess Charlotte, 8, was spinning in front of her mirror, delighted with her elegant dress that made her feel like a real princess. Little Prince Louis, 5 years old, was attempting to climb onto a chair while wearing his miniature formal wear, much to everyone's concern. "George, darling, you look absolutely magnificent," Catherine said, kneeling down to adjust his tie. "Today you're representing not just our family but the future of the monarchy. People around the world will see how brave and grown up you've become." George straightened his shoulders, suddenly understanding the importance of the moment. Charlotte ran to her mother, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Mummy, will there be horses and carriages like in the fairy tales?" Catherine smiled, remembering her own childhood dreams of royal pageantry. "Yes, sweetheart, and you'll be riding in one of those carriages. You're going to be part of something truly magical today." The logistics of preparing the entire family were overwhelming. Royal protection officers coordinated with palace staff, ensuring every detail was perfect. Catherine's stylist made final adjustments to her coat dress, a stunning creation in royal blue that would photograph beautifully against the ancient cathedral's backdrop. The color had been chosen specifically to represent stability and trust, qualities the monarchy needed to project during this historic transition. William joined his family, and for a moment, the formal atmosphere softened. He wrapped his arms around Catherine and pulled the children close. "Whatever happens today, we face it together as a family," he whispered. The children nodded solemnly, even Louis seeming to understand that this day was different from all others. Palace advisors briefed the family on the schedule, the seating arrangements, and the protocols they needed to follow. George would have specific responsibilities as third in line to the throne, while Charlotte and Louis would need to maintain perfect behavior throughout the lengthy ceremony. The pressure was immense, but the family had been preparing for months. As they prepared to leave their private apartments, Catherine caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She saw not just a princess, but a mother who was about to guide her children through one of the most significant days in their young lives. The weight of history, tradition, and expectation settled on her shoulders like the heavy ceremonial robes worn by generations of royals before her. The first official photographs were taken in the castle's grand reception room. The photographer captured the family's nervous excitement, the way William's hand rested protectively on George's shoulder, how Charlotte held her mother's hand, and how Louis looked up at his siblings with wide, wondering eyes. These images would become historic documents, marking the beginning of a new era for the British royal family. Outside, crowds were already gathering along the processional route, despite the early hour. Union Jack flags fluttered in the morning breeze, and the excitement was palpable. Street vendors sold commemorative items, and families had camped overnight to secure the best viewing spots. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation, and somewhere in the distance the sound of military bands practicing could be heard. Catherine looked out the window at the gathering crowds and felt a mixture of pride and overwhelming responsibility. These people had come to witness history, to be part of a tradition that stretched back over 1,000 years. Her children would be at the center of this ancient ceremony, representing the future of an institution that had weathered wars, scandals, and social changes. The final preparations were underway. Royal household staff conducted last-minute checks on the carriages that would transport the family to Westminster Abbey. The horses, magnificent creatures trained specifically for royal, ceremonial duties, were being groomed to perfection. Every detail had to be flawless because today would be remembered and analyzed for generations to come. As the time approached to leave Windsor Castle, the family gathered in the courtyard where their carriage awaited. The children's excitement was now mixed with nervousness as they realized the magnitude of what lay ahead. Catherine squeezed William's hand, drawing strength from their partnership that had weathered so many public appearances and private challenges. The journey to Westminster Abbey would take them through the heart of London, past hundreds of thousands of spectators who had come to celebrate this historic day. For the next several hours, the Wales family would be part of a ceremony that connected them to centuries of British history, tradition, and the hopes of a nation looking toward its future. The carriage doors closed with a soft click, and suddenly the Wales family was enclosed in their own small world, while the massive celebration continued around them. Prince Louis pressed his face against the window, watching the colorful crowds with wide-eyed amazement. The sea of people stretched as far as he could see, all waving flags and cheering. Catherine had positioned herself strategically between Charlotte and Louis, knowing that the younger children might need gentle reminders about proper behavior. George sat beside his father, trying to mimic William's composed posture and dignified wave. The 10-year-old had been practicing his royal wave for weeks, and now it was time to put those lessons into practice. The carriage moved slowly through London's historic streets, allowing the crowds ample opportunity to see the future of the monarchy. Professional photographers with massive telephoto lenses captured every expression, every gesture, every small interaction between family members. These images would appear on front pages around the world within hours. "Look at all the people, Mummy," Charlotte whispered, her eyes sparkling with delight. The 8-year-old princess had always enjoyed public appearances, possessing a natural charm that reminded many observers of her late grandmother Diana. She waved enthusiastically at groups of children who had dressed up in their finest clothes to catch a glimpse of the royal family. William pointed out landmarks to his children as they passed, trying to help them understand the historical significance of their route. They traveled down the Mall, that grand ceremonial avenue that had witnessed countless royal processions. The red road surface was lined with Union Jack flags hanging from every lamppost, creating a tunnel of patriotic color. The crowds grew thicker as they approached Westminster Abbey. Tourists who had traveled from around the globe mixed with local, London families, all united in their desire to witness this historic moment. Some people had elaborate picnics spread on blankets, while others held homemade signs welcoming the new king. The atmosphere was festive, almost like a national holiday. Catherine noticed how the children were handling the intense attention differently. George was becoming more serious, perhaps sensing the weight of his future role. Charlotte seemed energized by the crowds, smiling and waving with genuine enthusiasm. Louis alternated between excitement and restlessness, occasionally requiring gentle guidance from his mother to sit properly. Security was everywhere, though the royal protection officers tried to remain as invisible as possible. Plainclothes detectives mingled with the crowds, while uniformed police officers maintained clear pathways. Military personnel stood at attention along the route, their ceremonial uniforms adding to the pageantry of the occasion. As their carriage approached Parliament Square, the noise from the crowds became almost overwhelming. Thousands of voices cheered, camera flashes created constant sparkles of light, and the sound of helicopter blades overhead reminded everyone that this event was being broadcast live around the world. The children had never experienced anything quite like this level of public attention. "Remember what we practiced," William said quietly to his family. "Smile, wave gently, and stay calm no matter what happens." He had learned these lessons through years of public appearances, understanding that royal composure was essential even in chaotic situations. Today, he was passing this wisdom to the next generation. The carriage passed groups of school children who had been given special permission to watch the procession. Their teachers had prepared them for weeks, teaching them about the monarchy and the importance of the coronation. When the young royals waved at them, the children's excited screams could be heard even inside the carriage. Catherine adjusted Louis's position, as he began to fidget more noticeably. The 5-year-old's attention span was being tested by the long journey in the formal clothes that felt different from his usual play clothes. She whispered gentle words of encouragement, reminding him that he was helping his grandfather celebrate a very special day. Street performers had positioned themselves along the route, adding entertainment for the waiting crowds. Bagpipers played traditional Scottish melodies, military bands performed patriotic songs, and community groups had organized spontaneous celebrations. The entire city seemed to pulse with excitement and national pride. As Westminster Abbey came into view, its Gothic towers reaching majestically toward the sky, the significance of the moment became even more apparent. This ancient church had hosted coronations for nearly 1,000 years. Today, George, Charlotte, and Louis would witness their grandfather's transformation from Prince of Wales to King, just as they might someday experience their own historic moments within those same sacred walls. The carriage slowed as they approached the Abbey's entrance, where red carpets had been rolled out and ceremonial guards stood at perfect attention. Television cameras from dozens of countries were positioned to capture their arrival, and the commentary would be translated into hundreds of languages for viewers worldwide. Catherine took one final look at her children, smoothing Charlotte's hair and straightening George's collar. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. The children nodded, understanding that they were about to step from their private family moment into the full glare of international attention. The carriage came to a gentle stop, and palace officials moved forward to open the doors. The sounds of the crowd, which had been muffled inside the carriage, suddenly became crystal clear. Cheers, applause, and the clicking of countless cameras created a symphony of celebration. As the family prepared to step out, they could see the Abbey's magnificent entrance decorated with flowers and ceremonial banners, ready to welcome them into one of the most important days in recent British history. The moment Prince William stepped out of the carriage, a roar of approval rose from the assembled crowds. He turned back to help Catherine, who emerged looking absolutely radiant in her carefully chosen outfit. The morning sunlight caught the subtle details of her coat dress, and photographers captured the grace with which she moved, despite the intense scrutiny. George was next, stepping down with the careful dignity he had been taught, followed by Charlotte, who couldn't quite contain her smile of delight at seeing so many people celebrating. Finally, little Louis emerged, his eyes wide as he took in the massive crowds and the imposing facade of Westminster Abbey. The 5-year-old instinctively reached for his mother's hand. Catherine bent down slightly to whisper something to Louis, probably reminding him about the importance of staying close and following their practiced routine. The cameras captured this tender moment between mother and son, an image that would later be praised for showing the human side of the royal family during such a formal occasion. The family began their slow walk up the Abbey's steps, lined with members of various military regiments in their finest ceremonial uniforms. The household cavalry, the Welsh Guards, and representatives from regiments across the Commonwealth stood at attention, their polished boots and gleaming buttons creating an impressive honor guard. Inside the Abbey, 2,000 of the world's most important people were already seated and waiting. Kings and queens from other nations, presidents, prime ministers, and dignitaries from across the globe had gathered to witness this historic ceremony. The weight of their collective attention was almost tangible as the Wales family entered the ancient building. The Abbey's interior was breathtaking, decorated with thousands of flowers arranged in elaborate displays that had taken florists days to complete. Golden light streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the stone floors that had been walked upon by monarchs for nearly a millennium. The acoustics carried every footstep, every whispered word, creating an atmosphere of reverent anticipation. George walked beside his father, trying to match William's measured pace and dignified bearing. The 10-year-old had been coached extensively on proper deportment, and now he was putting those lessons into practice under the most challenging circumstances possible. His young face showed concentration as he focused on not making any mistakes. Charlotte seemed almost to glide beside her mother, her natural poise evident even at such a young age. She had inherited Catherine's grace and seemed genuinely to enjoy the formal atmosphere. Her dress moved beautifully as she walked, and she maintained the gentle smile that had been captured in hundreds of photographs during their journey to the Abbey. The processional music began, performed by the Abbey's world-renowned choir and orchestra. The ancient hymns filled the vast space with rich, complex harmonies that had accompanied royal ceremonies for centuries. The same melodies had been sung during the coronations of Elizabeth II, George VI, and countless monarchs throughout British history. As they moved toward their designated seats, the family passed close to other members of the royal family who had arrived earlier. The children caught glimpses of their great-aunts and great-uncles, all dressed in their finest ceremonial attire and looking appropriately solemn for the historic occasion. Their seats were positioned perfectly to provide them with clear views of the ceremony, while ensuring they would be prominently featured in the television coverage. Every angle had been carefully planned by palace officials working in coordination with broadcasting directors from around the world. Louis began to show signs of restlessness as the family settled into their seats. The 5-year-old's legs didn't quite reach the floor, and the formal atmosphere was quite different from his usual active play. Catherine discreetly positioned herself so she could provide gentle guidance if needed, while also maintaining her own royal composure. The Abbey continued to fill with distinguished guests, each arrival marked by subtle ceremonial protocols that had been refined over decades of royal events. Foreign royalty wore their national decorations, while British peers appeared in traditional robes that hadn't been seen in public for years. King Charles himself had not yet appeared, as protocol demanded he make his entrance at precisely the right moment in the ceremony. The anticipation in the Abbey was building steadily as guests settled into their seats and the final preparations were completed behind the scenes. George studied the order of service that had been provided, trying to understand the various elements of the coronation ceremony. His parents had explained the basic structure to him, but seeing it laid out formally helped him prepare for what would be a very long and complex ritual. The lighting inside the Abbey was carefully controlled to ensure optimal conditions for the television cameras that would broadcast the ceremony to an estimated global audience of over 1 billion people. The Wales family was very much aware that their every expression and gesture would be analyzed and discussed by viewers around the world. Cathedral officials moved through the space with quiet efficiency, making final adjustments to ensure everything would proceed flawlessly. The centuries-old ceremony had been updated with modern technology, but the essential elements remained unchanged from coronations that had taken place in this same location hundreds of years earlier. As the moment approached, for King Charles to begin his procession into the Abbey, the atmosphere became even more charged with anticipation. The Wales family prepared themselves for the moment when their private roles as son and grandchildren would merge completely with their public duties as members of the British royal family. Charlotte whispered something to her mother, probably asking a question about what would happen next. Catherine responded with a reassuring smile and a quiet word, maintaining the perfect balance between motherly care and royal protocol that had made her so respected in her role as Princess of Wales. The sound of trumpets echoed through Westminster Abbey as King Charles began his procession toward the altar. The Wales family stood with the rest of the congregation, and Catherine gently guided Louis to ensure he remained properly positioned. The 5-year-old's eyes grew even wider as he watched his grandfather, dressed in magnificent ceremonial robes, walking slowly down the aisle. George stood particularly straight, understanding that as third in line to the throne, his behavior during this ceremony was especially significant. He watched every detail of his grandfather's procession, perhaps imagining his own future coronation that might take place decades from now in this same historic setting. The ancient ceremony began with prayers that had been spoken at coronations for over 1,000 years. The Archbishop of Canterbury's voice carried clearly through the Abbey's acoustics, and the words seemed to connect this moment to centuries of British history. Charlotte listened intently, trying to understand the meaning behind the formal language. As the ceremony progressed through its various stages, the children witnessed traditions that few people would ever see in person. The presentation of the regalia, including the crown jewels that they had seen in the Tower of London during family visits, took on new meaning when used in their proper ceremonial context. Louis began to fidget during the longer speeches, and Catherine discreetly reached into her small purse to retrieve a few items she had brought specifically for this possibility. A small toy and some quiet activities helped keep the youngest family member occupied, without disrupting the solemn atmosphere of the ceremony. The music throughout the coronation was extraordinary, performed by musicians who had spent months preparing for this single performance. The Welsh Guards Band, choirs from across the United Kingdom, and soloists of international reputation created soundscapes that seemed to lift the entire ceremony to a higher level of grandeur. When the moment came for the actual crowning, the entire abbey fell into complete silence. Even Louis seemed to sense the importance of the moment and stopped his fidgeting to watch as the St. Edward's crown was placed on his grandfather's head. This crown, used only for coronations, hadn't been seen in public since Queen Elizabeth's coronation 70 years earlier. George watched his grandfather's transformation from prince to king with fascination and perhaps some apprehension, knowing that he would someday experience something similar. The weight of hereditary responsibility was becoming more real to him as he witnessed this ancient ritual that would eventually involve his own father, and much later, himself. The ceremony included moments when the congregation was invited to participate, and the Wales family joined in singing "God Save the King" with particular enthusiasm. Charlotte's clear young voice could be heard contributing to the vast chorus that filled the abbey with patriotic song. Television cameras captured intimate moments throughout the ceremony, including the way William watched his father with obvious pride and emotion. The relationship between the new king and his heir apparent was evident in their exchanged glances during significant moments of the ritual. As the ceremony moved through its various elements, including the anointing with holy oil and the presentation of the orb and scepter, the children witnessed symbols of monarchy that connected them to a tradition stretching back to medieval times. These weren't just museum pieces they had seen behind glass. They were living elements of their family's heritage. The abbey's atmosphere was charged with emotion when King Charles took his coronation oath, promising to serve his people with dedication and integrity. The Wales family, along with everyone present, understood they were witnessing a historic pledge that would shape the monarchy for the coming decades. Catherine managed the children's needs throughout the lengthy ceremony with remarkable skill, ensuring they remained comfortable and engaged, without ever appearing to fuss over them in a way that would distract from the solemnity of the occasion. Her experience at countless royal events had prepared her well for this challenge. During the recognition ceremony, when the congregation was asked to show their homage to the new king, the Wales family participated with obvious sincerity. Their voices joined the thousands of others in the abbey declaring, "God save King Charles," in a moment that gave everyone present goosebumps. The ceremony included elements that celebrated the diversity of modern Britain and the Commonwealth, with representatives from many cultures and faiths participating in various aspects of the service. The children witnessed a coronation that honored tradition while acknowledging the contemporary reality of their grandfather's kingdom. As the formal ceremony drew toward its conclusion, preparations began for the procession back to Buckingham Palace. The Wales family would once again travel through London streets, but this time they would be accompanying a newly crowned king, rather than a prince preparing for his coronation. The final hymns filled the abbey with such powerful music that even young Louis seemed moved by the grandeur of the moment. The combined voices of the congregation, choir, and orchestra created an unforgettable conclusion to a ceremony that none of the family would ever forget. When King Charles finally rose from the coronation chair, wearing the imperial state crown and carrying the orb and scepter, the transformation was complete. The children had witnessed their grandfather become their king, and their own positions in the line of succession had taken on new significance with this formal beginning of a new reign. The procession out of Westminster Abbey was even more magnificent than the entrance had been. King Charles, now wearing the imperial state crown, walked with renewed dignity while the Wales family followed at the appropriate distance behind him. The weight of the completed ceremony seemed to energize everyone, including the children who had maintained their composure throughout the lengthy ritual. As they emerged from the abbey into the bright afternoon sunlight, the roar from the crowds was absolutely thunderous. Tens of thousands of people who had waited patiently for hours erupted in celebration as they caught their first glimpse of the newly crowned king and his family. The children had never experienced anything quite like this level of public enthusiasm. The return journey to Buckingham Palace would take them through different London streets, allowing even more people to participate in the historic celebration. The route had been planned to maximize public access while maintaining security, and police estimated that over 1 million people had gathered along the various processional paths throughout the day. George walked with noticeably increased confidence, perhaps inspired by witnessing the successful completion of such an important ceremony. The 10-year-old had proven to himself that he could handle the pressure and formality required of his position, and this seemed to give him new assurance in his royal role. Charlotte practically glowed with excitement as she waved to the cheering crowds. The 8-year-old had clearly enjoyed every moment of the day's ceremonies and seemed energized rather than exhausted by the constant public attention. Her natural charisma was evident in the way she connected with the people lining the streets. The carriage ride back to the palace was filled with a different energy than the morning journey. The ceremony was complete, the pressure was reduced, and the family could begin to process the magnitude of what they had just experienced. Louis had managed to stay awake and alert throughout most of the coronation, which was quite an achievement for a 5-year-old. Catherine looked radiant as she waved to the crowds, her relief at successfully guiding her children through such a challenging day evident in her relaxed smile. She had managed to be simultaneously a supportive wife, a caring mother, and a poised princess throughout the entire event, earning admiration from royal watchers around the world. The streets were filled with celebration as the royal procession passed through central London. Street parties had spontaneously formed at various locations, with people sharing food and drinks while waiting for glimpses of the royal family. Union Jack bunting hung from buildings, and many spectators had dressed in red, white, and blue to show their patriotic spirit. William appeared more relaxed during the return journey, the successful completion of the coronation having removed much of the anxiety he had felt that morning. As heir to the throne, he had been particularly conscious of representing the monarchy properly during such a significant transition, and he had clearly succeeded in that responsibility. The military bands positioned along the route played celebratory music as the procession passed, creating a festive atmosphere that complemented the crowd's enthusiasm. The sound of brass instruments and bagpipes mixed with the cheers and applause to create a uniquely British soundtrack for this historic day. Television. Commentators around the world were praising the children's behavior throughout the ceremony and procession. Royal experts noted how well prepared they appeared and how naturally they seemed to handle the intense public scrutiny. Their parents' careful preparation and coaching had clearly paid dividends. As they approached Buckingham Palace, the crowds became even denser. The mall was packed with people as far as the eye could see, all hoping to witness the royal family's appearance on the famous balcony. This would be the climactic moment of the Coronation Day celebrations, when the new king would greet his subjects from the palace's most iconic location. The palace itself had been transformed for the occasion, with ceremonial decorations and additional security measures that had taken weeks to implement. Every window seemed to contain palace staff and guests who were eager to witness the family's triumphant return from Westminster Abbey. The carriage passed through the palace gates, amid tremendous cheering from the assembled crowds. The children pressed their faces to the windows to see the sea of people who had gathered in front of the palace, many of whom had been waiting since the early morning hours for this moment. Inside the palace courtyard, away from the public view, the family finally had a moment to collect themselves before the final public appearance of the day. Palace staff rushed to make any necessary adjustments to their appearance and to brief them on the timing for the balcony appearance that everyone was eagerly anticipating. The children were showing signs of fatigue after such a long and intense day, but they were also clearly excited about appearing on the balcony with their newly crowned grandfather. This would be their chance to acknowledge the crowds who had celebrated with them throughout this historic day. Catherine took a moment to check each child's appearance one final time, knowing that the balcony photographs would become some of the most iconic images of the entire coronation. The family had successfully navigated every challenge of this remarkable day, and now they were just minutes away from the traditional conclusion that would mark the official end of the coronation celebrations. The sounds from the crowd outside were constant and enthusiastic, with thousands of people chanting and singing while they waited for the royal family to appear. The anticipation was building toward what everyone knew would be an unforgettable moment when the newly crowned king and his family would share this historic achievement with the nation and the world. The massive crowd gathered in front of Buckingham Palace erupted in deafening cheers as the palace doors opened onto the famous balcony. King Charles stepped out first, still wearing the imperial state crown, followed by Queen Camilla in her magnificent coronation robes. The newly crowned monarchs waved to their subjects with obvious emotion and gratitude. Moments later, the Wales family emerged onto the balcony, and the crowd's enthusiasm reached an almost impossible crescendo. William and Catherine flanked their children, ensuring they were positioned perfectly for the photographers and television cameras that would capture this historic moment for posterity. George stood tall beside his father, no longer the nervous boy who had worried about his tight collar that morning. The 10-year-old had grown visibly in confidence throughout the day, and now he waved to the crowd with the natural dignity that would serve him well in his future role as king. Charlotte was absolutely radiant, her smile bright and genuine as she took in the incredible scene before them. The 8-year-old seemed to understand intuitively how to connect with the crowd, waving enthusiastically and occasionally pointing excitedly at particularly colorful sections of the assembled masses. Even Louis, despite his young age and the exhaustion that must have been setting in, managed to wave and smile at the thousands of people who were celebrating his grandfather's coronation. The 5-year-old had exceeded everyone's expectations for behavior and composure throughout this demanding day. The view from the balcony was absolutely breathtaking. The mall stretched out before them, completely filled with people as far as the eye could see. Union Jack flags created a sea of red, white, and blue, while homemade banners and signs showed the creativity and enthusiasm of the celebrating crowds. Catherine looked genuinely moved by the outpouring of public support and affection. Throughout the day, she had focused so intently on managing her children and fulfilling her own royal duties that she perhaps hadn't fully absorbed the historic significance of what they were experiencing. Now seeing the joy and celebration of so many people, the emotion of the moment seemed to hit her fully. The balcony appearance lasted for several minutes, giving everyone ample opportunity to wave, smile, and acknowledge the crowd's enthusiasm. Professional photographers captured thousands of images from every conceivable angle, knowing that these pictures would become defining images of King Charles's reign and the Wales children's royal childhood. William placed his hand gently on George's shoulder in a gesture that was captured by photographers and would later be analyzed as symbolic of the continuity of the monarchy. Father and son, current heir and future heir, standing together in this moment of triumph and celebration. The crowd began singing, "God Save the King," spontaneously, and the voices of hundreds of thousands of people created an incredibly moving moment. The royal family on the balcony joined in, their voices blending with those of their subjects in a demonstration of unity and shared purpose. As the balcony appearance drew to a close, King Charles gestured for his family to join him in one final wave to the crowd. The image of 3 generations of the royal family standing together on the palace balcony would become one of the most iconic photographs of the entire coronation day. When they finally stepped back inside the palace, the Wales family could finally relax for the first time in hours. The children had successfully completed one of the most challenging and important days of their young lives, and their parents could be enormously proud of how they had represented their family and their country. Their day's events would be analyzed and celebrated around the world for weeks to come. Fashion experts would discuss every detail of Catherine's outfit choices. Child development specialists would praise the children's remarkable composure, and constitutional experts would examine the ceremony's significance for the future of the British monarchy. For the Wales family, however, the most important achievement was simpler. They had successfully navigated this historic day as a united family unit, supporting each other through challenges and sharing in the triumph of a perfectly executed royal event. The children would remember this day for the rest of their lives. The day they saw their grandfather become king, the day they rode through London in a golden carriage, the day they waved to 1 million cheering people from the most famous balcony in the world. These memories would shape their understanding of their roles in the monarchy and their responsibilities to the nation. As evening approached and the crowds began to disperse, the Wales family could finally enjoy some private time together to process the extraordinary experiences of the Coronation Day. They had witnessed and participated in history, representing the future of an ancient institution while staying true to their roles as a loving, supportive family. The successful completion of King Charles's coronation, with the Wales family playing such a prominent and dignified role, had demonstrated to the world that the British monarchy remained strong, relevant, and capable of inspiring genuine affection and respect from millions of people across the globe.